Welcome to Bedtime Noir. Tonight, we present a haunting tale of forgotten memories, buried truths, and one man's strange disappearance. The Man in the Tan Coat is a slow-burning investigative mystery that begins with an unassuming photograph and ends at the edge of reality itself. As rain whispers against the windows and the world outside fades, let this story guide you through misty streets, quiet fear, and the eerie hum of things left unsaid. Settle in. Close your eyes if you wish. The mystery will unfold in time. Now, let us begin. Chapter 1: The Routine Walker. In the town of Dorrington, nestled deep within a valley where the fog rolled in as predictably as the 6:15 train from the distant city and every shop front dimmed its lights by 8, life moved with a quiet, almost somnambulant rhythm. It was a town of habit, of unspoken routines, and of people who preferred the comfort of the familiar, the reassuring predictability of daily life. The kind of place where generations lived and died in the same houses, their stories intertwining like the ancient roots of the maple trees lining the main street. Claire Hastings, a quiet librarian whose apartment hummed with the gentle scent of old paperbacks and lived above the town's only bakery, the Daily Loaf, was one such person. Her days were a tapestry of duodecimal classifications, hushed whispers from patrons, and the comforting, tactile weight of knowledge contained within bound pages. Her evenings, however, had recently acquired an unexpected, unsettling thread, one that slowly began to unravel the neat edges of her carefully constructed world. It began, as most things in Dorrington did, with a subtle shift in the established order. For Claire, this shift manifested as a tall, slender man in a slightly oversized tan trench coat, who walked the same stretch of road every evening at precisely 8:17 p.m. Always 8:17. Not 8:15. Not 8:20. It was the kind of precision that initially went unnoticed, blending into the town's general predictability, until it repeated itself with an almost mechanical, almost defiant insistence. Only then did it etch itself into the collective consciousness, a silent, living clock hand marking the passage of the evening. Claire first noticed him on a Tuesday evening, a week after she finally managed to coax her stubborn peace lily into blooming, a small victory in her otherwise orderly life. She was out on her small, wrought-iron balcony, a quiet perch overlooking Maple Street, watering her collection of herbs and succulents. The cool mist from the hose was a pleasant counterpoint to the lingering warmth of the day, and the air was thick with the sweet, yeasty smell rising from the bakery below. A flicker of movement caught her eye below, on the quiet street. It wasn't the usual hurried pedestrian rushing home, or the ambling dog walker enjoying the twilight air. This was different. He moved with measured steps, a deliberate, almost ceremonial pace, down the quiet street. His head was always slightly bowed, his gaze fixed straight ahead, never veering, never acknowledging the houses, the lamplights, the occasional rustle of leaves, or the faint sounds of distant televisions. He never spoke. He never looked up. At first, Claire dismissed him as just another local, perhaps one of the many retirees who found solace in nightly strolls. Dorrington was full of them, figures who had settled into their twilight years with an almost religious adherence to routine. But something about this man, even from her third-story vantage point, felt distinct. It was his path. He emerged from the dense, ancient trees that bordered Old Post Road, a forgotten, winding trail that led out of town, past the stoic, grey stone of the town hall, continued down Maple Street, then executed a precise, almost military turn at the boarded-up theater. The Grand Picture Palace, a relic of Dorrington's more vibrant past, its marquee still bearing the faded ghost of old movie titles, before disappearing into the thick, encroaching fog near the crumbling iron gates of the old cemetery. Always the same route. Always the same coat, a shade of tan that seemed to absorb the fading light, making him appear less a person and more a silhouette, a moving shadow against the deepening dusk. And always, unsettlingly, alone. The next day, a slow Wednesday at the library, the image of the man lingered in her mind, a persistent, quiet hum beneath her conscious thoughts. She found herself mentioning him to Ellie, her co-worker, a woman whose perpetually cheerful demeanor and bright, floral scarves were often at odds with the quiet solemnity of their profession. "You know, the man in the tan coat?" Claire began, trying to sound casual as she restocked a shelf of historical fiction, her fingers tracing the worn spines. "The one who walks down Maple Street every night, just after 8? Ellie, looking up from a towering stack of returned books, her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously scanned each barcode, paused. Her eyes, framed by practical, wire-rimmed glasses, widened slightly. "Oh, him," she said, a hint of something that wasn't quite fear, but certainly unease in her voice. She lowered the book, resting her chin on its spine. "Yeah, I've seen him. Creeps me out a bit, honestly. Never seen him go into a house or a shop. Just walks. Like he's on a mission, but to nowhere." Claire tilted her head, a small frown forming. "Do you know his name? Or where he lives?" "I've never seen him around during the day." Ellie shook her head, pushing her glasses up her nose with an ink-stained finger. "Nope. Nobody does, far as I know. But he's been doing that walk for as long as I can remember. My dad used to call him Metronome Man. Said you could set your watch by him, he was so precise. He joked that if the Metronome Man was late, the world was ending." Claire chuckled, a dry, almost nervous sound that felt out of place in the hushed library. The nickname was apt, perfectly capturing the man's unwavering consistency. But the title stayed with her, burrowing into her thoughts. Metronome Man. A machine, not a person. Over the following days, she found herself increasingly drawn to her window just before 8:17 p.m. A silent, almost involuntary ritual. She wasn't obsessed, she told herself. Just curious. Curious in the way people become interested in puzzles with no missing pieces, where the solution should be obvious, but isn't. A small, nagging itch in the back of her mind that demanded to be scratched. She began to notice the smaller details, the ones that escaped casual observation, the nuances that only a dedicated watcher would perceive. His shoes, though always polished to a dull gleam, were perpetually dusted with a fine layer of Dorrington's ubiquitous mist, as if he walked through an invisible, perpetual cloud. His pace, while steady and unwavering, possessed an odd stiffness, a lack of fluid motion, as if his joints were unyielding, or perhaps, not truly there. His hands were always, without exception, tucked deep into the pockets of his coat, as if he were guarding something precious, or perhaps, hiding something terrible. He never carried a phone, a briefcase, a newspaper, or even an umbrella, despite Dorrington's notorious rainfall. And it rained a lot in Dorrington. The kind of persistent, soft drizzle that seeped into everything, including your bones, blurring the edges of the world. Yet the man in the tan coat remained impervious, his coat seemingly shedding the moisture without effort, his hair never plastered to his forehead. One particularly slow evening, the kind where the silence of her apartment felt almost oppressive, emboldened by 2 generous glasses of the boxed Merlot she kept for emergencies and the quiet hum of her own solitude, Claire made a decision. It was impulsive, a sudden surge of a desire for proximity, for a clearer view. Just as the clock on her wall edged towards 8:17, she slipped out her front door, pulling it shut softly behind her. She didn't say anything, didn't call out. She simply stood near her gate, pretending to fix a loose latch that wasn't actually loose, her heart thudding a nervous rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat against the quiet evening. The man appeared, a silent, gliding shadow in the fading light, materializing from the mist as if he were born of it. He passed within 10 feet of her, his eyes remaining straight ahead, fixed on some unseen point in the distance. His steps were steady and, to her growing astonishment, utterly soundless. It was as though he floated more than walked, a phantom limb of the evening, a figure untethered from the physical laws of friction and gravity. He didn't glance at her. He didn't acknowledge her presence in any way, not even the slightest shift in his shoulders, the smallest hesitation. He simply continued his precise trajectory until he turned the corner at the boarded-up theater and vanished into the thickening fog, leaving only a lingering chill in the air. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hand still clutched to the cool metal of the gate, her knuckles white. That was the first night she noticed something else, something profoundly unsettling that transcended mere oddity. No sound. No footfalls. Not even the subtle shuffle of his coat against his legs, or the faint rustle of fabric. The air around him seemed to absorb all ambient noise, leaving an unnatural vacuum in his wake, a pocket of absolute silence in a world of subtle sounds. She stood there for a moment longer, her hand still on the gate, the cool metal grounding her, trying to process the impossible. There was a heaviness in the air, a peculiar stillness that settled in her chest and made everything feel slightly off-kilter, as if the world had just subtly shifted on its axis, and she was the only one who noticed. The next morning, the unsettling silence of his walk gnawed at her, a persistent, irritating itch in her mind. She tried to look him up, tried anyway. She searched local online directories, scrolled through community forums, even checked the town's digital census records at the library, a resource usually teeming with information on Dorrington's inhabitants, a digital record of every soul. Nothing. No photos, no complaints, no social media posts, no property records, no utility bills. If he lived in Dorrington, he didn't exist on paper. He was a phantom in the digital ether, a ghost in the municipal archives, a man without a trace. But someone that consistent, that precise, that visible to so many, had to be real, didn't they? He was witnessed by too many, too much a part of the town's fabric, however strange, to be a figment of imagination. She didn't say anything to Ellie again. Not yet. The questions forming in her mind felt too outlandish, too close to the edge of the explainable, too likely to elicit a look of pity or concern from her cheerfully pragmatic coworker. Instead, she began logging it. A small, leather-bound journal, usually reserved for her most private thoughts and occasional poetry, now became a meticulous record of his appearances. She kept it hidden beneath her socks in her dresser drawer, a secret chronicle of the metronome man, a testament to her growing, unsettling obsession. October 12th, clear skies. Tan coat. Walked same route. 8:17 on the dot. Silent. Unsettling. October 13th, slight drizzle. Tan coat. Walked same route. Same time. Still silent. Coat seemed dry. October 14th, heavy fog. Tan coat. Walked same route. Same time. Unnerving silence. Felt a chill as he passed. October 15th, crisp autumn air. Tan coat. Same time. Same route. No sound. My heart was pounding. October 16th, light rain. Tan coat. Same time. Same route. Still no sound. Did he even touch the ground? October 17th, clear, cold. Tan coat. Same time. Same route. The silence is the most unnerving thing. October 18th, overcast. Tan coat. Same time. Same route. I tried to hear him. Nothing. October 19th, drizzle. Tan coat. Same time. Same route. He is a ghost. October 20th, heavy fog. Tan coat. Same time. Same route. I felt like he knew I was watching. October 21st, clear, cold. Tan coat. Same time. Same route. Last night I saw him. By October 21st, she had noted 10 consecutive appearances. Always on time. Always silent. Always alone. Her curiosity had deepened, evolving into a quiet, almost scholarly pursuit, tinged with a growing apprehension. She felt like an amateur cryptographer, trying to decipher a code written in movement and silence, a secret language of the night. Until October 22nd. That night, 8:17 came and went. No man. Claire blinked at the clock on her wall, its luminous hands glowing softly in the dim room, then checked her wrist watch. Then her phone. All synced, all confirming the time. She went to the window, peering through the slight condensation on the glass, her breath fogging the pane. Nothing. The street was quiet, lit by the soft, golden halo of the lamppost near the old grocery store, Dorrington's Provisions. There was the gentle hiss of mist hitting the ground, and the occasional croak of frogs near the drainpipe. But no footsteps. No coat. No man. The absence was louder than any sound. It felt like a missing beat in the town's steady rhythm, a sudden, jarring silence where there should have been a presence, a void where a pattern had been. She waited until 8:30. Then 9. Then 9:30. Still no sign. The air felt thin, hollowed out by his absence, as if a vital component of the town's nocturnal machinery had simply ceased to function. She barely slept that night, tossing and turning, convinced she'd simply missed him somehow, that her vigil had been imperfect, that her eyes had betrayed her. But the next day, at the library, the unease persisted, a dull ache behind her eyes. She approached Ellie again, trying to keep her voice light, but the tremor was unmistakable. "Hey, Ellie, have you seen the metronome man lately? I haven't seen him for a couple of nights." Ellie chewed on her pen cap, a habit she reverted to when deep in thought, her gaze unfocused. Oh, haven't seen him in a few days, actually. Didn't even cross my mind. Maybe he got sick. Or finally left town. Honestly, good riddance. He always gave me the shivers, just staring straight ahead like that. Claire nodded, feigning agreement, forcing a thin smile, but the unease burrowed deeper into her thoughts, like a tenacious worm in soft wood. Ellie's casual dismissal only amplified the unsettling feeling. For Claire, his disappearance felt like a rupture in the very fabric of Dorrington, a tear in the veil of normalcy. By October 24th, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The absence was a gaping hole in her routine, a question mark hovering over the town, a silent accusation. She replayed his route in her mind, then, driven by an almost desperate need for answers, retraced it during the day on foot, walking the exact path he took, trying to find any clue, any discarded item, anything that would confirm his physical reality, his tangible presence. She walked past the town hall, its windows reflecting the gray sky, past the boarded-up theater, its silence echoing demands. She tried asking around again. The coffee shop barista, a chatty woman who sold newspapers outside town hall, even the elderly couple who ran the dry cleaners. They all knew of him. Some called him Coat Man. Others thought he was a harmless eccentric, a quiet fixture of Dorrington's peculiar charm. But when she pressed for a name, or even a general idea of where he lived, the answers dried up, replaced by shrugs and vague recollections, a collective amnesia that felt almost deliberate. "I thought he lived near the cemetery," one woman offered, her voice trailing off uncertainly, as if the thought had just occurred to her. "I thought he was your neighbor," said another, looking at Claire with a hint of suspicion, as if Claire herself were the strange one for asking. Claire even sought out Mr. Donovan, who had run the watch repair shop for 40 years, his shop filled with the rhythmic ticking and chiming of countless timepieces. He was legendary for remembering every face, every story, every minute detail of Dorrington's past, a living archive of local lore. "Oh, that guy," Mr. Donovan said, adjusting his thick, bifocal glasses, his eyes twinkling with age and wisdom. He paused, tapping a tiny screwdriver against a disassembled pocket watch, its intricate gears laid bare. "Been walking that stretch since I was a teen. Used to see him when I was dating my wife, bless her soul. Always alone. Never a word. Never bought a watch, never had one repaired. Just walked. Like he had all the time in the world, and none at all. I figured he was a ghost, honestly." Claire laughed nervously, a thin, reedy sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "A ghost? You really think so?" Mr. Donovan didn't laugh back. His gaze was steady, serious, and held a depth of understanding that chilled Claire to the bone. He didn't. She left the shop with her pulse thudding a frantic rhythm in her ears, the rhythmic ticking of the watches echoing in her mind. Mr. Donovan's casual, yet firm, Assertion resonated with a chilling weight. He spoke with the certainty of someone who had seen something impossible, and accepted it. That night, she stood outside again at 8:15, wrapped in her thickest coat, the damp chill seeping into her bones, trying to ward off the cold dread that was beginning to settle in. She watched the street, a silent sentinel in the encroaching mist. Nothing. 8:17 ticked past. Still nothing. The silence of the street was profound, almost accusatory, a heavy blanket muffling all sound. But just as she was about to turn back inside, defeated, her gaze fell upon her flower box, nestled beneath her window, its petunias drooping slightly from the damp. A small piece of paper lay there, folded neatly. It wasn't wet from the mist, despite the dampness clinging to everything else. It looked almost as if it had just been placed there, moments before, untouched by the elements. She picked it up, her fingers brushing against the cool, dry paper. The texture was unusual, almost too smooth. No name on the outside. Inside, written in precise, blocky handwriting, each letter a perfect, sharp square, as if stamped by a machine. You shouldn't be watching. No punctuation. No signature. No explanation. Just the stark, unsettling command, a direct address to her, a confirmation that her vigil had been noted. Claire looked up and down the street. Empty. Not a soul. No footsteps echoing away into the fog. No doors closing. No breeze rustling the leaves. The world was utterly still, as if holding its breath, waiting for her reaction. She took the note inside and stared at it for an hour, the words burning themselves into her mind, searing themselves onto her memory. Something wasn't right. The man in the tan coat was gone. And someone knew she had been paying attention. Someone, or something, was watching her back. Chapter 2: The Day He Vanished. Claire folded the note once, twice, the crisp paper a stark contrast to the tremor in her hands. It felt impossibly heavy, a physical manifestation of the invisible threads now tightening around her. She tucked it inside the worn pages of her journal, the one hidden beneath her socks, a futile attempt to bury the unsettling truth. Her hands trembled, not from fear exactly, but from a profound sense of confusion, a jarring dislocation of her understanding of reality. The handwriting on the note was too neat, too precise, each letter square and sharp, as if printed by a machine rather than formed by a human hand. It lacked the imperfections, the unique quirks that define individual penmanship. It felt inorganic, alien. She didn't sleep that night. The words, "You shouldn't be watching," replayed in her mind, a relentless, accusatory whisper, amplified by the silence of her apartment. Every creak of the old building, every distant siren, seemed to carry the weight of that warning. At 2:30 a.m., unable to endure the restless silence of her bed, the suffocating presence of her own thoughts, she got up, wrapped herself in a thick wool blanket, and sat by the window. Maple Street was a canvas of empty mist, glazed with the soft, diffused light of the street lamps, their halos blurred by the pervasive fog. One particular lamp flickered now and then, like an old bulb dying slowly, its intermittent glow casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and stretch, transforming familiar shapes into monstrous specters. Otherwise, the night was calm. Too calm. The kind of unnatural calm that settles just before something unexplainable happens, a vacuum preceding an event that defies logic, a silence that screams. By morning, a cold, steely resolve had replaced her confusion. She decided to go deeper. The note, far from deterring her, had ignited a fierce determination, an almost reckless need for answers. She wasn't just curious anymore, she felt implicated, challenged, a pawn in a game she didn't understand. The warning felt less like a threat and more like a dare. At the library, the fluorescent lights hummed, casting a familiar, comforting glow, but Claire felt a new tension in the air, a prickle of unease that the familiar surroundings couldn't dispel. She kept her voice low when she approached Ellie, who was meticulously organizing the new arrivals, humming a cheerful, off-key tune. "Ellie," Claire began, trying to sound casual, but her voice was tighter than she intended, a thin wire stretched taut. Do we have access to archived security footage? From the traffic cameras? Ellie paused, a paperback held midair, and gave her a look that was a mixture of surprise and mild amusement, quickly morphing into something resembling concern. What, like town surveillance? You mean the single, ancient camera they have pointed at the intersection of Maple and Main? The one that barely works when it's raining? Claire nodded, her gaze unwavering, her jaw set. From Maple Street. I want to check something. Specifically, the last week or so. Every night, around 8:17. Ellie raised an eyebrow, a knowing smirk playing on her lips, but it faded as she saw the seriousness in Claire's eyes. You're not actually still looking for that coat guy, are you, Claire? He's probably just on vacation, finally decided to see the world beyond Dorrington. Claire hesitated, choosing her words carefully, trying to find a balance between revealing too much and getting the information she needed. He's missing. And I got this strange note. She touched her pocket, where the folded paper lay. I just want to know if he really walked the route every night, like everyone says. Or if it's all in people's heads, a kind of collective delusion, a shared hallucination. She didn't mention the note's content, nor the chilling implications of her own observations, the impossible silence of his walk. Ellie shrugged, returning to her books, but her eyes lingered on Claire for a moment longer than usual. Well, if it's official town footage, you'd have to talk to Town Hall. They log everything for up to a month, I think. It's all stored on some ancient server in the basement. Ask for Officer Vickers. He's usually bored enough to help with anything that breaks up the monotony of his paperwork, especially if it involves a pretty face. She winked, trying to lighten the mood, but Claire barely registered it. Claire left work early, a knot of anticipation tightening in her stomach, a cold dread coiling around her heart. She found Officer Vickers at his desk inside the squat brick building behind the courthouse, a structure that looked as if it had been transplanted directly from a 1950s police procedural, all drab brick and institutional green paint. He was a burly man with a perpetually tired expression, currently engrossed in a crossword puzzle, a half-eaten donut on a napkin beside him. He looked genuinely surprised that anyone was visiting, especially someone from the library, a realm he likely considered far removed from the mundane realities of Dorrington's minor infractions and lost dog reports. Security footage? He repeated, scratching his chin, his pen hovering over a clue for a 6-letter word for feline. Sure. Nothing classified. You just need to fill out a form, state your reason, and I can pull it up for you. We get a lot of requests for footage of speeding cars, or kids messing with the old theater sign. 5 minutes later, Claire was seated opposite him in a small, windowless room that smelled faintly of stale coffee, dust, and something metallic, like old electronics. A single, ancient monitor flickered to life, displaying a grainy, black and white feed from the town's only traffic camera that pointed down Maple Street. The image was indistinct, a blurry tableau of the quiet road, the flickering street lamp, and the occasional passing car, distorted by the camera's low resolution. Pick a date, Vickers said, sipping from his mug, his eyes still on his crossword. Goes back 30 days. Anything older than that gets overwritten. Start with October 17th, Claire said, her voice barely a whisper, her gaze fixed on the screen. She remembered that night vividly, the precise, silent passage of the man, the way the fog had seemed to part for him. She watched as the footage sped forward, a blur of accelerated time, the cars zipping past like ghosts. The digital clock on the screen counted down the seconds, a relentless march towards the appointed hour. At exactly 8:17 p.m., the camera captured nothing. Just a quiet road. A flickering street lamp. No one walked by. The empty street stretched on, undisturbed, a blank canvas where she knew a figure should have been. Claire frowned, leaning closer to the screen, her fingers pressing against the dusty glass. Are you sure this is the right date? And the right camera? Positive, Vickers grunted, without looking up, his voice tinged with mild irritation. See the timestamp? October 17th, 8:17 p.m. And that's the only camera on Maple. Trust me, I'm the one who has to maintain it. Try the 18th. She urged, a prickle of ice starting in her fingertips, spreading rapidly through her veins. Nothing again. The same empty street, the same flickering light, the same profound absence. Claire sat back, her mouth suddenly dry, her throat constricting. A chill, unrelated to the room's temperature, began to spread through her, an icy dread that tightened around her lungs, making it hard to breathe. Is the camera working? She asked, the question sounding absurd even to her own ears, a desperate plea against the impossible. Perfectly, Vickers said, finally looking at her, a hint of annoyance, now mixed with a flicker of curiosity, in his eyes. We'd have 100 speeding complaints if it wasn't. It's always recording. Never had a glitch on this one. Check the 19th. She insisted, her voice now laced with a desperate urgency, a frantic edge she couldn't hide. Nothing. Not even a shadow. The street remained stubbornly, inexplicably empty, a silent, mocking testament to her sanity. A cold bloom spread in her chest, an icy dread that tightened around her lungs. She had seen him on each of those nights. She had recorded it in her journal, meticulously, with dates and times. His tan coat. His slow, silent walk. His steady route. She had stood at her window, a silent witness, a living camera. He had been there. Hadn't he? Vickers gave her a side glance, his crossword forgotten for a moment, his brow furrowed. Something wrong, ma'am? You look a little pale. You sure you're feeling all right? She shook her head slowly, unable to articulate the profound sense of disorientation she felt, the terrifying chasm opening between her perception and objective reality. Could I get a copy of this? For my records? For personal research? Not really standard procedure, he said, his gaze hardening slightly, suspicion creeping into his eyes. Unless it's part of an incident report. You know, a crime, an accident. We don't just hand out footage to anyone who asks. Especially for personal research. Claire stood, the chair scraping loudly on the linoleum floor, the sound jarring in the small room. Never mind. Thank you for your time, Officer Vickers. I appreciate your help. He nodded, already returning to his mug and crossword, dismissing her as another eccentric Dorrington resident, a common enough occurrence in a town with its share of oddities. She walked home in a daze, the familiar streets of Dorrington feeling alien, distorted, as if the very ground beneath her feet had shifted. The town didn't feel small anymore, it felt empty. Like a stage after the actors had left, the props still in place, but the life gone. Like something was pretending to be normal while she stood just off to the side, watching the seams of the world split open, revealing a terrifying void beneath. Her memories, her direct observations, her very sanity, were at war with the cold, irrefutable evidence of the camera. That evening, 8:17 came again. She didn't go outside. The thought of standing vigil for a figure that might not even exist, or worse, existed only when unseen, was too much. The implications were too terrifying. Instead, she sat on the floor near her bookshelf, surrounded by the comforting spines of stories, trying to ground herself in the tangible. She listened to the rhythmic ticking of her wall clock and the soft pitter of rain on the windows. Every now and then, her gaze drifted to the flower box outside, where the first note had appeared, a silent, chilling reminder. Nothing. No figure on the sidewalk. No footsteps. No tan coat. The street remained stubbornly, hauntingly empty, a silent scream of absence. She began flipping through old books, trying to distract herself, to find solace in the familiar narratives. Her fingers brushed against a spine she didn't recognize, wedged behind a stack of forgotten paperbacks. It was a local history book, one the library had weeded out years ago, deemed too obscure for general circulation, too filled with forgotten minutiae. She didn't remember keeping it, but there it was, its spine faded, its cover smelling faintly of mold and forgotten basements, a musty scent that spoke of age and neglect. She opened it on her lap, the pages brittle and yellowed with age, crumbling slightly at her touch. Inside was a grainy black and white photo of Dorrington's main street, dated 1977. It showed old storefronts, rusted signs, and a cinema that had long since closed, its marquee a faded promise of forgotten matinees. But there, almost unnoticed on the far right edge of the photo, a man in a tan coat. Claire leaned in, her breath catching in her throat, her heart leaping into her mouth. He was smaller in the frame, a distant figure, almost a smudge, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Standing near the corner of Maple Street, precisely where the metronome man always began his walk. Same build. Same posture. Same coat. A cold sensation trickled down her spine, a profound chill that had nothing to do with the dampness of the evening. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern stretching back decades, a thread woven through time. She flipped to the photo credits. No mention of names. Just local contributors. A generic attribution that offered no further clues. She scanned the rest of the book. Town celebrations, historical fires, mayoral speeches, lists of prominent citizens. And then, near the end, an obituary section. Not full listings, but snippets and newspaper clippings, pasted haphazardly onto the pages, a morbid collage of Dorrington's departed. She stopped on one headline, her eyes widening in disbelief, a gasp escaping her lips. Local man dies walking routine path, collapses near cemetery gate. Date, October 22, 1977. She read the article 3 times, her mind struggling to process the information, to reconcile the impossible. The man's name was Arthur Vale, age 41. Survived by no family. Walked the same route every night for years after returning from war. Quiet. Kept to himself. Had no job, no apparent purpose beyond his nightly stroll. Witnesses said he collapsed without a sound just a few steps from the cemetery gate, precisely where the man in the tan coat always disappeared. Claire stared at the name. Arthur Vale. She opened her journal, her hands trembling, and compared the dates. He had died exactly 46 years ago. On the same date the man in the tan coat had disappeared this year, October 22nd. Her breath caught, a sharp, painful gasp. The coincidence was too profound to be mere chance. It was a synchronicity that screamed of something far more sinister, a cosmic echo across time. She closed the book, hands trembling, and sat in silence as the rain drummed harder against the window, a relentless, echoing beat that seemed to mock her fragile hold on reality. Her plants swayed slightly in the breeze outside, their shadows dancing on the wall. Everything felt suddenly smaller, her apartment, her thoughts, her very sense of reality. The comfortable, predictable world of Dorrington had cracked open, revealing a chilling, impossible truth, a truth that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. She got up, went to her desk, and pulled out the folded note again, the one that had warned her not to watch. "You shouldn't be watching." She flipped it over, her fingers tracing the blank back, searching for answers. No watermark. No imprint. But for the first time, she noticed something faint, barely visible unless the paper caught the light just right, a subtle indentation on the surface, a ghost of writing. She grabbed a pencil and gently shaded over the back, her movements slow and deliberate, as if revealing a fragile, ancient secret, coaxing it into existence. A second message appeared, like a whisper emerging from the fog, slowly, inexorably, into visibility. He walks when no one watches. Chapter 3. The Man Who Was Never There. Claire stared at the ghost message, the shaded pencil revealing letters that looked carved more than written, etched into the very fibers of the paper. The words blurred under her breath as she whispered them aloud, a chilling mantra in the quiet room, a confirmation of her deepest fears. He walks when no one watches. It made no sense, and yet, in a way she couldn't explain, a terrifying, intuitive way, it made perfect sense. The camera footage. Her own observations. The collective memory of the town, fragmented and unreliable as it was. She had only ever truly seen the man because she had looked. People remembered him because they'd seen him, but never with anyone else. Always from afar. Always alone. He was a solitary figure, a fleeting glimpse, a peripheral presence, a shadow at the edge of perception. And on the days she tried to find proof, to capture him, to confirm his existence with objective evidence, he simply didn't appear. The camera, a cold, impartial eye, saw nothing. Her own eyes, however, had seen him. He walks when no one watches. She ran her fingers over the paper, half expecting it to burn her, to leave a searing mark on her skin. A warning etched into cellulose, a message from a realm beyond her comprehension, a direct communication from the impossible. There was no denying it now, this wasn't just a man. He wasn't just a local oddity or an eccentric neighbor. Something about him bent logic, bent time, bent memory. He existed in a liminal space, a paradox made flesh, a creature of observation. The photograph from 1977 proved that much. He had been walking then, decades ago, the same figure, the same coat. A constant in a changing world, yet a constant that defied the laws of physics and presence, a persistent echo. She pulled out the history book again and stared at Arthur Vale's obituary. No surviving relatives. No estate. No funeral, just a small, almost dismissive write-up in a town paper that no longer existed, a forgotten echo of a forgotten life. She scribbled his name into her journal, the pen pressing hard against the page, indenting the paper, Arthur Vale. The name felt fragile, delicate. Like it might disappear if she didn't say it out loud, if she didn't anchor it to her own reality, to the tangible world. She went back to the article and jotted down the name of the journalist who had written it. Daniel Mercer. The name felt like a thread, a fragile connection to someone else who had peered into this unsettling void, another witness to the impossible. Claire opened her laptop and began searching for the name. Nothing came up in current town records. No current addresses. No online mentions, no digital footprint. It was as if Daniel Mercer, like Arthur Vale, had simply faded from existence, swallowed by the same strange phenomenon. She tried the old-fashioned way, flipping through the archived Dorrington directories she kept on a USB drive at the library, a digital relic of a bygone era, filled with the names and addresses of generations past. She scrolled through the digitized pages, her eyes scanning for the familiar name. She found something under 1977, the same year as Arthur Vale's death. Mercer, Daniel. 114 Birchwood Lane. That was something. A physical address. A tangible lead. A place where answers might reside. Birchwood Lane was less than 15 minutes from her apartment, nestled on the outskirts of Dorrington, a winding road that quickly gave way to dense woods. The house numbers were low out there. Mostly cabins and old craftsman homes, their paint peeling, tucked between overgrown gardens and creaky fences. It was the kind of neighborhood where screen doors slammed in the summer breeze, and everyone knew if you weren't local, a place where strangers stood out, where secrets were guarded. Claire didn't wait until morning. The urgency of the situation, the chilling implications of the notes, propelled her forward, a desperate need for understanding overriding her fear. She threw on her thickest coat, tucked the second, newly revealed note into her pocket, and grabbed her flashlight and umbrella. She walked through the misty streets, the beam of her flashlight cutting a weak swathe through the swirling fog, trying not to let the wind talk her out of it, trying to ignore the prickle of fear that danced on her skin, a cold, insistent shiver. Birchwood Lane was darker than the rest of town, the street lamps giving way to oppressive shadows. No street lamps here, just pale windows glowing faintly through gauzy curtains, and the skeletal silhouettes of wind-churned trees, their branches clawing at the sky. Her breath misted before her, a fleeting ghost in the cold air. Number 114 was nearly swallowed by vines, its porch sagging, its mailbox leaning precariously like a drunk old man, barely visible in the gloom. The house itself was dimly lit from inside. Just one lamp glowing through a front window, a solitary beacon in the encroaching darkness, drawing her in. Claire hesitated at the foot of the 3 creaky steps leading to the porch. Her logic screamed at her to go home, to retreat to the safety of her apartment, to dismiss this as a strange, elaborate prank, a figment of her overactive imagination. But curiosity, a relentless, insatiable force, had long since overruled caution. She climbed the steps, each creak of the old wood echoing loudly in the stillness, a sound that seemed to amplify the silence of the night. She knocked, the sound surprisingly loud in the quiet night, a sharp rap against the old wood. Silence. She knocked again, a little louder, her knuckles rapping against the cold wood, a desperate plea. A few seconds passed, stretched taut by the silence, before she heard a faint shuffling from within, a dragging sound, as if someone was moving with great effort. The door opened an inch, revealing a sliver of darkness, a sliver of a face. An old man's voice, raspy and thin, like dry leaves scuttling across pavement, rasped out. "Who is it? What do you want at this hour? Daniel Mercer?" Claire asked, her voice a little breathless, a little uncertain. The door opened a little farther, revealing a pale, narrow face, white, wispy hair, yellowed eyes that seemed to have seen too much, and a look of profound weariness, of someone who hadn't trusted the world in years, someone haunted by memories. His face was a road map of wrinkles, each line a story untold. "Yes?" His voice was a question, laced with suspicion, a defensive edge. "My name is Claire Hastings. I'm a librarian. I found something you wrote about Arthur Vale." At that name, his expression changed, subtly but profoundly. His eyes, already narrowed, tightened further, becoming slits of suspicion, then something else, something akin to fear, and then a flicker of recognition, a spark of shared burden. "Why are you digging into that? That's ancient history. Best left buried." "Because I've seen him," she said, her voice gaining strength, conviction, a desperate need to be believed. "I've seen Arthur. Or someone who looks exactly like him. For years, apparently. Walking the same street. Same time. Then he vanished. And I think someone's watching me now." She pulled the note from her pocket, holding it out, its precise block letters now seeming even more ominous in the dim light. "I received this. And another one. Just last night." Mercer's gaze fell upon the note, and his eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a tremor passing through his frail frame. He took it, his fingers surprisingly steady, and read the message. A low groan escaped his lips. He opened the door just wide enough to usher her in, a silent, weary invitation. Claire stepped into a room that smelled overwhelmingly of old paper, dust, and the faint, metallic tang of ink, a scent that clung to everything. Books and newspapers filled every shelf, piled high on tables, spilling onto the floor, forming narrow pathways. It was a labyrinth of forgotten stories, a testament to a life spent immersed in the written word, a life consumed by information. A single, dusty desk lamp cast a weak, yellow glow, illuminating a small island in the sea of paper, a solitary beacon in the gloom. "You're the first person to say that name in almost 50 years, he said, his voice softer now, tinged with a strange mix of resignation and surprise, a lifetime of silence finally broken. He sat slowly in a faded recliner, its fabric worn smooth from years of use, sinking into its depths. "I wrote about him because I was there that night. I saw it all." Claire sat opposite him, careful not to disturb the precarious stacks of books, her journal clutched tightly in her hand, her knuckles white. "What happened?" she asked, leaning forward, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation, a desperate hunger for the truth. He tapped his fingers slowly on the armrest, a dry, rhythmic sound, like a metronome keeping time. "Arthur Vale was harmless. A quiet man. Came back from the war, changed. Shell-shocked, they called it then. Nerves all shot up. He just walked. Every evening, same route. Nobody paid him much attention, not really. Just another quiet Dorrington eccentric. Not until he died. Or rather vanished." Claire nodded, remembering the obituary. Collapsed by the cemetery gates? Mercer's voice dropped, becoming a low, conspiratorial whisper, his eyes darting around the room as if fearful of unseen listeners. Yes. But what no one printed, what no one believed, is what I saw. I was following him that night, just like you've been doing. Curious, I guess. A young reporter looking for a story, something beyond the usual town council meetings and bake sales. I stood by the theater and watched him walk, just as he always did. And then, right before he reached the gate, he just froze. Like a record skipping, a film reel seizing up, a statue coming to life, then stopping dead. Claire leaned in, her breath held captive in her chest, hanging on his every word. He didn't fall. He didn't even flinch. It was like he unraveled. Like light coming apart, dissolving into the air. 1 second he was there, a solid figure, a man in a tan coat, and the next he wasn't. Nothing left. Not even footprints in the damp grass, no impression in the mud. Just gone. Vanished. As if he'd never been there at all. He looked away, his yellowed eyes far off, staring into a past only he could see, a trauma replayed in his mind. I went to the police. They dismissed me. Called it trauma, said I imagined the rest. Said I was overwrought, a young man with an overactive imagination. They said he collapsed and the fog obscured him, that he was probably just disoriented. But they never found a body. Not a trace. No search party ever found anything. Claire's breath caught, a sharp, ragged sound. No body? Just gone? Mercer shook his head, his gaze returning to her, filled with a shared, unspoken understanding, a burden he had carried alone for decades. Just his coat, lying in the grass. Damp from the rain. Folded neatly, as if he'd simply stepped out of it, leaving it behind like a discarded skin. A heavy silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of decades of unspoken truth, of impossible events. The only sound was the distant drumming of rain against the window, a steady, mournful rhythm. Claire finally whispered, her voice fragile, barely audible. I've seen him. For weeks. He still walks the same route. Or did, until October 22nd. Mercer nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on hers, a grim confirmation. That's the same date. The exact date. 46 years to the day. I found this, she said, pulling out the note she'd brought, its precise block letters now seeming even more ominous, a direct link to his past. He took it, his fingers surprisingly steady, and read the message. His lips tightened, a grim line of recognition. Same message I got. 46 years ago. Slipped under my typewriter the day after he vanished. Just like that. He snapped his fingers, the sound sharp in the quiet room. A warning. Claire's chest tightened, a cold knot of dread. Who left it? Do you have any idea? I don't know, he admitted, his voice barely audible, a whisper of defeat. But after that night I stopped asking. Stopped looking. Stopped writing about anything that wasn't safe. Started writing about gardening and book fairs. Anything mundane. Anything to forget. Figured whatever Arthur was, it didn't want to be followed. It didn't want to be known. And it had a way of making sure you stopped looking. Claire stood, a surge of adrenaline vibrating under her skin, a fierce, unyielding determination replacing her fear. The fear was still there, a cold undercurrent, but it was now mingled with a desperate need for answers, a pull she couldn't resist. I think I have to keep following it. I have to know. You don't, he said firmly, his voice suddenly sharp, urgent, his frail hand reaching out to grasp her arm. Let it lie, Miss Hastings. Some things are better left undisturbed. Some truths are too dangerous. They consume you. But something in Claire's bones, a deep, primal instinct, said otherwise. She felt a pull, an irresistible force drawing her deeper into the mystery, a sense of destiny she couldn't ignore. She had already seen too much to turn back. She left the house as the wind picked up, howling through the ancient trees, rattling the fence posts along Birchwood Lane, a mournful lament. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, shrouding the world in an inky blackness, a darkness that seemed to swallow all light. Somewhere far off, a church bell rang, its muffled chimes carried on the wind, counting out the passing hours, a somber toll. Back home, she sat at her desk, the single lamp casting a pool of light on her open journal. Under the last note she had made, she scribbled one word in the corner, a question that echoed the turmoil in her soul, a desperate plea to the universe. Why? And then, without thinking, a whisper escaping her lips into the quiet room, a challenge to the unseen, a desperate call into the void. Arthur Vale! Where are you? A gust of wind howled outside, louder than it should have been, a mournful, almost human sound that seemed to answer her. The power flickered, plunging the apartment into momentary darkness, then returning with a soft hum. Her wall clock stuttered for a second, then returned to normal, its steady ticking a stark contrast to the chaos she felt within. And on the windowsill, where the old flower box sat, something small fluttered. A second note. No footsteps. No sound. Just a note, appearing as if conjured from the very air itself, a terrifying, impossible delivery. She stepped forward, her heart thudding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat of dread. This one was folded the same way, with the same precise creases. Inside, the same square, machine-like handwriting. You've seen too much. And beneath it, barely visible in the paper's texture, an indentation again. She grabbed her pencil, her fingers trembling, and shaded it in. The second message emerged, chillingly clear, a direct, personal threat, a prophecy. You'll walk too. Chapter 4: The Letter. Claire didn't move for a full minute. The second note clutched in her hand, its weight disproportionate to its size, a feather imbued with the crushing weight of a nightmare. The paper felt warm, almost hot, as if it had just been handled, but her street was empty. Utterly, impossibly empty. No footsteps echoing away into the night. No rustling leaves, no distant car engine. Not even the whisper of a breeze. The very air seemed to hold its breath, a silent witness to the impossible. She turned off the lights in her apartment, plunging the room into near darkness, and looked outside. The rain had stopped, but a heavy, impenetrable fog had rolled in, a thick, white shroud that smothered the town, blurring every edge, every familiar landmark. It made every shape outside feel like a suggestion rather than a certainty, a fleeting illusion. The kind of fog that made you question your own eyes, your own sanity. You'll walk too. The words echoed in her head like a whisper slipping through walls, a chilling prophecy that resonated deep in her bones. It wasn't a question, but a statement. A promise. Claire knew she wouldn't sleep that night. The thought of rest was an absurdity. Instead, she did what she always did when fear refused to leave her alone. When her world tilted on its axis, she researched. She needed to understand, to categorize, to find a pattern in the chaos, to bring order to the impossible. She booted up her laptop, the soft hum of the machine a comforting, familiar sound in the oppressive silence. She opened a blank document, its white screen a stark contrast to the darkness outside. Title: The Man in the Tan Coat, a Log. Below it, she typed every fact she had, every observation, every chilling detail, meticulously organizing the fragments of her shattered reality. Subject: The Man in the Tan Coat, possibly Arthur Vale. Routine: always walks at precisely 8:17 p.m. Visibility: appears only when no one actively watches him, i.e., not captured by static surveillance. Disappearance: vanished on October 22, 2023, the exact same date Arthur Vale died 46 years ago, October 22, 1977. Record: no digital or physical record of him, census, public records, etc. Communication: leaves cryptic, precisely written notes warning observers. Claire received 2 messages. You shouldn't be watching. And, he walks when no one watches. Claire received a third message. You've seen too much. With the hidden message. You'll walk too. Daniel Mercer received one message in 1977, identical to Claire's first. Arthur Vale, died October 22, 1977, collapsed near Cemetery Gate. Body never found. Historical evidence. Photograph from 1977 shows figure in tan coat, identical to current observations. Multiple townspeople remember him, but no one knows his name or origin. Most recollections are from a distance, no direct interaction reported. Always walks the same precise path. No sound while walking, appears to float. She paused, tapping the keys absently, the rhythmic click-clack a small comfort. The list was chilling in its consistency, a testament to a phenomenon that defied every rule of memory, every rule of physics. It wanted to be seen, but only from a distance. It warned her to stop, but hadn't done anything else, not yet. Yet. That word scratched at her thoughts, a sharp, insistent claw. What would happen next? What was the consequence of ignoring the warning? She stared at the screen until her eyes burned, the glowing text a beacon in the dark room. Then, on a strange, almost defiant impulse, she typed a new line, a question that felt like a challenge thrown into the void. What happens if someone follows him, despite the warnings? She didn't like the silence that followed, a silence that seemed to deepen, to press in on her from all sides. The next day, Claire left work early, her mind buzzing with a desperate energy. Ellie was off, which made things easier, allowing Claire to pursue her increasingly dangerous obsession without scrutiny. She slipped into the library's dusty records room, a place usually reserved for forgotten microfiches and ancient town ledgers. Armed with a thermos of strong coffee and a fresh notebook, she began a deeper search, a frantic hunt for any pattern, any anomaly, any forgotten incident that might shed light on the man in the tan coat. She looked into local disappearances. Not just recent ones, but stretching back decades. Accidents that seemed too strange to be accidental. Deaths that occurred near Maple Street, especially around October, the month that seemed cursed. She cross-referenced dates, locations, and any unusual circumstances. And then she found it, a series of old clippings, yellowed and brittle with age, tucked away in a folder labeled Unsolved. The first, from 1996. High school student vanishes after late study session. Backpack found near cemetery. Claire's skin prickled, a cold wave washing over her. The boy's name was Jeremy Clive, age 17, a bright student known for his late-night study habits. Last seen walking home from the school library, a route that would have taken him down Maple Street. Witnesses claimed to have seen him near Old Post Road around 8 p.m., just before his usual turn onto Maple. But no one had seen him after 8:15. His backpack, containing his textbooks and a half-eaten apple, was found neatly placed near the cemetery gates, untouched by the dew or the elements. Claire stared at the article. No remains were found. No leads. The police investigation had gone cold after a week, officially classified as a runaway, despite his family's protests. She flipped to the next entry, her fingers trembling. 2009. Woman found in catatonic state near cemetery gate. Mystery deepens. Name, Margaret Renner, 34, a local artist known for her vibrant, almost ethereal landscape paintings. Found by a jogger just after 8:30 p.m. on October 21st. She was standing motionless, eyes open, unblinking, staring into the middle distance, unable to speak, respond, or even acknowledge her surroundings. Hospital notes claimed psychogenic shock, but no trauma or physical injury was recorded. She remained in that state for months before eventually being transferred to a long-term care facility outside of Dorrington, where she still resided, a living ghost. The jogger reported a strange, unnatural silence in the air just before he found her, a stillness that had unnerved him. Claire's heart hammered in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. There was a pattern. A terrifying, undeniable pattern. People disappeared. People froze. People broke. All within days of October 22nd. All along the man's route. all connected to the cemetery. She found another, older clipping, from 1951. Local farmer's wife reports strange encounter, shadow man, at crossroads. Name, Agnes Miller, 62. Reported seeing a tall figure in a long coat at the intersection of Old Post Road and Maple Street, late at night on October 23rd. She claimed he was not quite there, like a picture that hadn't fully developed. She reported a profound sense of dread and a temporary loss of hearing after the encounter. Doctors dismissed it as a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. The pieces were falling into place, forming a mosaic of horror. The man in the tan coat wasn't just a local legend, he was an active, recurring phenomenon, a catalyst for these strange, unexplainable events. And he was tied to the date of Arthur Vale's disappearance. She left the library as dusk rolled in, the clouds hanging low and heavy, pressing down on the town. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The town looked dimmer than usual, as though someone had dialed the brightness down, muting its colors, dampening its sounds. Claire passed by the shuttered movie theater, its marquee still bearing the rusted imprint of coming soon. The Man Who Laughed. A joke, maybe, or a long-forgotten final screening, a chilling irony given the silent, unsmiling figure she now pursued. As she walked, a plan began to form in her mind, reckless and terrifying, but utterly compelling. A desperate gamble. If the figure only walked when unwatched, if the camera saw nothing, if he was a creature of perception, what would happen if she saw him first, then followed him anyway? Not from a distance, not from a window, but directly, intentionally. Was it dangerous? Every fiber of her being screamed yes. The fates of Jeremy Clive and Margaret Renner were stark warnings. Would it give her answers? She had to believe it would. It was the only path left. Would it stop the notes? Possibly. Or it would lead to a new, even more terrifying message. That night, at 8:10 p.m., Claire left her apartment, her heart thudding like a trapped bird. She dressed in dark clothing, practical and unobtrusive. She stood behind a utility pole halfway down Maple Street, a familiar landmark now imbued with a sinister significance. Hidden by shadow, her breath misting in the cold air, she waited with her phone recording video silently in her coat pocket, its lens pointed towards the intersection where he always appeared. A small, desperate attempt at objective proof, even if she suspected it would be futile. At 8:17 on the dot, he appeared. From the mist, like a memory blooming into reality, the man in the tan coat materialized, right where he always did, at the very edge of her perception. He didn't walk into view. He simply was there. He walked slowly, precisely, each step a deliberate, silent calculation. Claire's pulse throbbed in her throat, a frantic, almost painful beat. She watched as he passed the lamplight, his face barely visible in the diffused glow. No details, just the shape of high cheekbones, a hint of thin lips, blank, dark eyes staring forward, seeing nothing, or seeing everything. He was an absence, a void in human form. She took a deep, shaky breath, the cold air burning her lungs. Then, with a surge of desperate courage, she stepped onto the sidewalk and began to follow. 10 feet behind. No sound from his steps, no rustle of his coat. It was as if he were a projection, a silent film playing out before her. Her own footfalls felt deafeningly loud, intrusive, loud, out of place, a jarring disruption to the supernatural silence he carried. She tried to match his pace, to mimic his strange, gliding gait, but her human clumsiness felt like a shout. 20 feet. Still no reaction. He continued his unwavering path, oblivious, or uncaring, of her presence. The street stretched out before them like a corridor in a dream, endless and silent. The fog swirled around them, thickening, blurring the houses, the trees, the very edges of the world. Claire's breath hitched. She felt a growing sense of unreality, as if she were stepping into a painting, leaving the known world behind. He passed the theater, his coat barely rippling, a phantom passing through solid air. She kept walking, her eyes fixed on his back, a desperate anchor in the shifting landscape. The air grew colder, heavier, charged with an invisible energy. When they reached the cemetery gate, the ancient wrought iron looming like a skeletal hand in the mist, she stopped. Her instincts screamed at her to halt, to turn back, to flee. He didn't. Instead, he continued forward, directly into the wrought iron gate. And then through it. Not around. Not over. Through. As if the bars were mist, and he were something more vapor than flesh, a being that transcended physical barriers. He simply flowed, a dark current through the metal. Claire blinked, her mind struggling to comprehend. Her jaw dropped. He was on the other side now, walking into the cemetery, the ancient gravestones rising like silent sentinels from the swirling fog. Her breath caught a choked gasp. Then he stopped. For the first time, he turned. And looked at her. No expression. No anger. No surprise. Just awareness. His dark, hollow eyes met hers across the spectral barrier of the gate, and in that moment Claire felt something inside her stretch, like a rubber band pulled too tight, thin and fragile, on the verge of snapping. A profound, unsettling connection. The wind died. The night fell completely still, a suffocating silence that pressed in on her ears. Even the distant croaking of frogs ceased. And then, just as suddenly, he turned back and disappeared behind a massive, weathered tombstone, swallowed by the fog and the ancient earth. Claire ran to the gate, her hands fumbling frantically with the rusted latch, her fingers clumsy with adrenaline. She yanked it open, stepped into the cemetery, the damp grass cold beneath her shoes, and found herself utterly, terribly alone. No man. No coat. No footprints in the soft, wet earth. Just silence. A profound, echoing silence that seemed to mock her. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, its screen a small, glowing rectangle in the vast darkness. It was still recording. She looked at the screen, her heart hammering. Nothing but the street. No figure. She scrolled back through the footage, desperately, frantically. From the moment she pressed record, it had been blank. Just sidewalk, lamplight, fog. No man. No coat. No her. She wasn't in it either. Her own figure, which she knew had been there, was absent. Only the street. As if the moment she stepped onto Maple Street to follow him, she had vanished from reality, erased from the objective record, becoming as unseen as he was. She looked up at the sky, then slowly back at the gate, her gaze falling on the stone step just inside the cemetery. Folded neatly on the cold, damp stone was a third note. No envelope. No creases. Just a single line in blocky, perfect handwriting, stark against the pale paper. Now you've begun. Claire backed away, stumbling over a hidden root, her mind reeling. The words resonated with a terrifying finality. And for the first time in weeks, she felt afraid not of him, not of the man in the tan coat, but of what he might have unlocked inside her, of the path she had unknowingly stepped onto, a path from which there might be no return. Her curiosity had led her to the edge of an abyss, and she had willingly, blindly, stepped over. Chapter 5. A Walk Through Old Roads. The third note, with its chilling prophecy. Now you've begun. Burned in Claire's pocket like a secret she wasn't ready to tell, a brand on her soul. The words echoed relentlessly through her mind, a relentless, pounding rhythm louder than the rain that had started again, tapping a persistent, mournful beat on her window panes. It was a new kind of fear, not the sharp, immediate terror of a threat, but a creeping, existential dread. She was no longer just an observer, she was a participant, perhaps even a victim, in a story far older and stranger than she could have imagined. The fog had returned overnight, thicker and more oppressive than ever, wrapping the town in a heavy, silencing shroud. Every streetlight cast a dull, yellow glow, struggling to pierce the mist, their light absorbed and diffused into an ethereal haze. The world beyond her apartment felt blurred, indistinct, like a watercolor bleeding at the edges, its lines dissolving into uncertainty. It was a world that seemed to mirror the confusion in her own mind. Claire's thoughts were a whirlpool of questions and unease, each answer she found only spawning a dozen more terrifying inquiries. What had she begun? What path had she stepped onto? One from which there might be no return. Was she doomed to become another entry in her chilling log, another vanished person, another catatonic shell? The image of Margaret Renner, standing motionless, eyes unblinking, haunted her. She didn't sleep that night. Sleep was a luxury she could no longer afford, a surrender to the unknown. Instead, she spent the remaining hours of darkness packing a small bag with essentials. Her notebook, now filled with frantic scribbles and ominous dates, a pen. Her trusty, though now seemingly useless, flashlight, a bottle of water, and the now familiar, terrifying folded notes, each a chapter in her unfolding nightmare. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that answers wouldn't come to her behind closed doors, not anymore. The answers lay out there, in the mist, on the path. At dawn, the town still slumbered beneath a gray, bruised sky, the silence broken only by the drip of water from eaves and the distant cry of a lone bird. Claire slipped out quietly, careful not to wake her neighbors, their peaceful sleep a stark contrast to her waking nightmare. She headed for the edge of town, towards the ancient, overgrown roads where the man in the tan coat began his nightly ritual, the place where the veil between worlds seemed thinnest. Her boots pressed softly into the damp earth of Old Post Road, the gravel crunching faintly beneath her weight. The air was thick with the scent of wet leaves, decaying wood, and the faint, metallic tang of ozone lingering from the night's strange encounter. The creak of the boarded-up theater whispered to her as she passed, a silent witness to decades of stories, some told, many forgotten, and now one repeating. Its faded marquee seemed to mock her, a silent, grinning face in the fog. She stopped where the lamppost flickered weakly, its light struggling against the oppressive mist. She remembered how, weeks ago, she'd watched from her window as the man passed under its sickly light, a distant, curious observer. It seemed a threshold, a marker between the world she knew and something else entirely, a gateway she had now crossed. Claire pulled her coat tighter, the fabric stiff with moisture, the chill seeping into her bones. She ran her fingers over the notes again, tracing the blocky letters, the impossible precision of the handwriting. The consistency was terrifying, too deliberate, too perfect, like it belonged to a machine or a hand trained to write only warnings, an automated message from a cosmic entity. She wondered, for the thousandth time, who had sent them. Was it the man himself? Or something else, something pulling the strings, orchestrating this strange dance? Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, not footsteps, not precisely. A soft rustling, like fabric brushing against the wind, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. She turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat. A figure stood in the fog, a man, tall and lean, cloaked in a coat that was unmistakably tan, a shade that seemed to absorb the light around him. He materialized as if the mist itself had coalesced into his form. Her heart caught, a painful spasm in her chest. He was closer now than she had ever seen him, close enough to see the outline of his face, a face as pale and blank as a faded photograph, devoid of expression, yet somehow conveying an immense, ancient sorrow. His eyes, dark and hollow, seemed to pierce through the fog, through her, seeing something beyond. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Just stood there, a silent, unmoving sentinel in the swirling mist, waiting. Claire's breath came out in a shaky cloud, her body trembling uncontrollably. She stepped forward, then stopped herself, a primal instinct to flee warring with an irresistible urge to know. "Who are you?" she asked softly, her voice trembling, barely a whisper against the vast silence of the fog. "Why do you walk? What do you want from me?" The man didn't answer with words. His lips remained a thin, unmoving line. Instead, he raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, with an almost agonizing slowness, and pointed toward the cemetery gates, the ancient ironwork looming ominously in the distance. A cold shiver ran down Claire's spine, a deeper chill than the morning air. The cemetery. The place where Arthur Vale collapsed decades ago. The place where the man disappeared. The place where Jeremy Clive's backpack was found, where Margaret Renner went catatonic. It was the nexus, the heart of the mystery. Gathering every ounce of courage she possessed, she followed his silent gesture and started walking, her feet moving as if of their own accord, drawn by an unseen force. The path into the cemetery was overgrown with weeds and fallen branches, the stone markers cracked and leaning with age, some barely legible, swallowed by moss and time. The air inside the cemetery was thick and still, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, the fog swirling low around her feet, obscuring the ground, making it seem as if she walked on clouds. Each step felt like a trespass, a violation of sacred ground. As she moved deeper, memories of the past seemed to seep into the air, to cling to the ancient stones, ghostly whispers of footsteps long gone, echoes of laughter, distant sobs, the silent screams of the lost. She felt the weight of decades, of lives lived and ended, pressing in on her. She paused at a weathered gravestone, its granite surface rough beneath her fingertips, the name nearly worn away by time, a testament to the relentless march of erosion. She squatted, her knees aching, and traced the faint, almost indiscernible letters with her finger. It read, Arthur Vale, 1936 to 1977, always walking. A profound chill ran through her, deeper and colder than any she had felt before. The man in the tan coat stood silently behind her, a palpable presence, watching her, his gaze a physical weight on her back. Claire turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. Are you him? Arthur Vale? His lips didn't move. His face remained blank, unreadable. But his eyes, those dark, hollow pools, held a flicker of something. Remorse? Sadness? A profound ancient weariness? Or was it a warning, a silent plea? Suddenly, the sky cracked open with a deafening clap of thunder that seemed to shake the very ground beneath her feet. Rain began to fall, first in soft patters, then in heavy, relentless sheets, drumming on the cracked tombstones, turning the cemetery into a slick, glistening landscape. The world was consumed by the downpour, a chaotic symphony of sound. Claire's flashlight flickered erratically, its beam dancing wildly, then went dark, plunging her into near-total blackness, the fog and rain combining to create an impenetrable shroud. Panic pricked at her chest, sharp and cold, 1,000 tiny needles. She fumbled for her phone to use as a light, her fingers clumsy with fear, but the screen remained black, unresponsive. The rain plastered her hair to her face, blurring her vision. The man in the tan coat stepped closer, his form a darker shadow in the gloom. She could hear the faintest rustle of his coat now, like dry leaves in the wind, a sound that was both intimate and terrifying, a sound that should not have been there. Why are you here? Claire demanded, her voice louder now, desperate, cutting through the drumming rain. What do you want from me? What is this place? He reached out, his arm extending slowly, deliberately, and before she could react, his fingers brushed her wrist. Cold as ice, a profound, unnatural chill that seemed to seep into her very bones. A shock like electricity pulsed through her arm, not painful, but intensely disorienting, a jolt that vibrated through her entire being. Suddenly, she was flooded with visions. Not just images, but sensations, emotions, a torrent of fragmented memories that were not her own. Flickers of images raced behind her closed eyelids, a dizzying, terrifying kaleidoscope, a war-torn battlefield, the deafening roar of artillery, the screams of dying men, a young man haunted by loss, his eyes empty, his spirit broken, a quiet town wrapped in fog and silence, a town that seemed to breathe and watch, a figure walking the same routine path night after night, trapped in an endless, silent loop, a prisoner of his own past. A sentinel of a boundary. She saw glimpses of others, vague, shadowy forms, walking the path, their faces filled with the same blank despair as the man in the tan coat. She saw their moments of unraveling, their silent disappearances. Claire gasped, a choked sob, and stumbled back, collapsing onto the wet grass, her mind reeling, overwhelmed by the torrent of impossible information. When she opened her eyes, the man was gone. She was alone. Alone except for the rain, which continued to fall, now softer, a gentle patter. The storm had passed as quickly as it came, leaving the cemetery slick and shining in the dim morning light, the fog beginning to thin, revealing the gray sky above. Claire sank to her knees, breathing hard, her body shaking uncontrollably, her mind a whirlwind of impossible truths. She looked at her wrist. No coldness remained, but a faint mark lingered. A pattern of tiny scratches, like a message written in pain, a permanent scar on her skin, a brand. She traced them with trembling fingers. The scratches formed a single word, searing itself into her consciousness. Follow. Her mind spun. Follow what? Follow who? Follow where? The command was clear, but its meaning was a terrifying enigma. She knew, deep down, with a chilling certainty, that this was no longer just a story about a mysterious man or a ghostly figure. It was no longer a puzzle to be solved from a distance. It was about her. And the path she was being pulled toward, one she couldn't see the end of, a path that now seemed to be her destiny. Chapter 6. The Mirror. Claire woke with a start, the echo of thunder still rumbling faintly in her ears, a phantom sound from the night before. Sunlight filtered weakly through the rain-streaked window panes, casting uneven patterns on the floor of her small apartment. The scratches on her wrist ached faintly, a dull, persistent throb, a physical reminder of the night's encounter, of the impossible visions, of the chilling command. Follow. Her mind reeled, a chaotic storm of fragmented memories and terrifying revelations. She sat on the edge of her bed, the memories flooding back with brutal clarity. The cold touch, the torrent of Arthur Vale's fractured past, the whispered word, "You belong now." But belong to what? A cycle? A curse? Her thoughts spun in circles, tangled and uncertain, like the dense fog that still clung to Dorrington's streets, refusing to lift, mirroring the confusion in her soul. The air felt heavy, charged with something unseen, a palpable tension that hummed just beneath the surface of reality. Determined, Claire rose and dressed quickly, her movements stiff, almost mechanical. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer just a curious observer, a detached researcher, but a part of something bigger, something ancient, something older than the town itself, a mechanism she had unwittingly activated. She grabbed her coat, her journal, and the now familiar folded notes, their crisp edges a stark contrast to the swirling chaos in her mind. She headed out, the morning chill biting at her cheeks, the dampness seeping into her clothes. The streets were quiet, damp from the rain, but with an undercurrent of movement that she couldn't explain, a subtle shift, like the town was holding its breath, waiting for her next move. Her first stop was the library, a place that had always been her sanctuary, her fortress of knowledge. Now, it felt like a repository of secrets, a labyrinth of hidden truths. She needed to review every scrap of information she could find on Arthur Vale, Daniel Mercer, and the strange disappearances around October 22nd. Hours passed as she pored over yellow newspapers, faded letters, and forgotten diaries, her fingers stained with dust and the faint scent of decay. The stories all circled the same mysterious figure, the man in the tan coat, but now, she saw them with new eyes, eyes that had seen the impossible. But there was one detail that had escaped her notice until now, a phrase buried deep within the forgotten archives. The Mirror Walk. It appeared in a single, cryptic entry in an old diary belonging to a woman named Eleanor Trask, dated 1932. Eleanor Trask, it turned out, was a reclusive local historian, known for her eccentric theories about Dorrington's hidden past. The passage, written in a delicate, spidery hand, read, October 23, 1932. The fog was thick tonight, thicker than I have ever seen it. He appeared, just as the legends say, at 8:17. I watched from my window, as I always do, but tonight he turned. He looked at my reflection in the glass, and I saw not him, but a swirling void. He walks between worlds, a reflection in the mirror of time. Those who watch see only the surface, the illusion of normalcy. but those who follow risk becoming part of the shadow, becoming a part of his endless journey. They become the reflection, not the reflected. The boundary is thin, especially on the 22nd and 23rd of October. One must never cross it. One must never follow. Claire's heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. The diary spoke of a walk. A crossing between reality and something else, a perilous journey. It spoke of reflections, of shadows, of a boundary. Eleanor Trask had seen it too, had understood the danger. And she had warned. That afternoon, Claire returned home with the diary clutched tightly in her hand, its brittle pages a tangible link to a forgotten truth. As dusk approached, painting the sky in bruised purples and grays, she prepared herself for what she both feared and hoped to face. The return of the man in the tan coat, and the inevitable confrontation. She changed into comfortable walking shoes, packed a small bag with her journal, a pen, and a new, fully charged flashlight, a futile gesture against the supernatural. At exactly 8:17 p.m., the fog rolled in again, thick and silent, swallowing the last vestiges of daylight. She stepped outside, onto the sidewalk of Maple Street, her breath visible in the cold air, a ghostly plume. She waited, her gaze fixed on the spot where he always appeared, her heart a frantic bird in her chest. He appeared silently, emerging from the mist like a figure drawn from a half-remembered dream, a living shadow. His coat was damp, pressed tightly around him as always, seemingly impervious to the moisture. His eyes, dark and unreadable, locked onto hers immediately, a silent, ancient gaze that seemed to pierce her very soul. Claire held his gaze. This time, she did not hide. She did not flinch. She stepped forward, closing the gap between them, a desperate act of defiance and acceptance. "Who are you?" she asked quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Why do you walk? What is the mirror walk?" He did not answer with words. His lips remained a thin, unmoving line, his face a blank mask. Instead, he gestured behind him, slowly, deliberately, toward a large, ornate mirror leaning against the side of the boarded-up theater. It was an antique, its gilded frame tarnished with age, its surface cloudy with years of neglect. It looked as out of place as a forgotten prop on an empty stage. Claire followed his motion and looked. The mirror's surface rippled like water, not reflecting the street, the fog, or the theater behind her. Instead, it showed a swirling landscape of shadows and mist, a distorted, shifting void that seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. It was a portal, a window into another dimension, a reflection of a world that was not her own. She felt an irresistible pull, a magnetic force drawing her in. It was as if the mirror beckoned her to step through, to cross into a place where time folded back on itself, where past and present merged, where reality was fluid. It was terrifying, yet utterly compelling. Suddenly, the man reached out and took her hand. Cold, steady, his touch sending a profound chill through her arm that bypassed her skin and went straight to her bones. Her heartbeat quickened, a frantic drumbeat, but there was no fear, not truly. Only a deep, strange calm, a sense of inevitability, as if this moment had been waiting for her entire life. He led her closer to the mirror, his grip firm, guiding her towards the shimmering surface. As she gazed into its depths, the fog around them thickened, swirling into a vortex, and the world seemed to tilt, to spin wildly, losing all sense of up and down. The sounds of Dorrington faded, replaced by a low, resonant hum, like a distant, ancient engine. Images flashed before her eyes, a dizzying, overwhelming torrent of fragmented moments. A younger Arthur Vale, his face etched with the trauma of war, walking the street in the 1940s, a shadow slipping past the lamppost, his steps silent even then. Daniel Mercer typing furiously at an old typewriter, his brow furrowed in concentration, his face pale with fear. Eleanor Trask, her eyes wide with a terrible understanding, scribbling frantically in her diary. Jeremy Clive, a terrified teenager, dropping his backpack near the cemetery gates. Margaret Renner, her eyes blank, standing motionless in the fog. And then, her own face, pale and uncertain, watching from a window, then following, then running. The mirror showed not just scenes, but moments, threads of time woven together, a tapestry of repetition, of lives caught in a loop. It was a living history, a record of every soul who had seen, who had followed, who had become part of the walk. Claire realized the truth, a chilling, profound understanding that settled deep in her soul. The man in the tan coat was a fragment of something lost, a loop trapped between past and present. He was both a ghost and a sentinel, walking the boundary between worlds, a guardian of a forgotten path, a living echo of a past trauma. He was a warning, a guide, and a victim, all at once. Her wrist stung where the scratches had marked her, and she looked down to see the pattern glowing faintly, a soft, ethereal light emanating from her skin, pulsing with the same rhythm as the hum from the mirror. The scratches were not just a mark, they were a connection, a key. The man whispered, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves, like sand shifting in a forgotten hourglass, barely audible over the hum. "You belong now." And in that instant Claire felt herself unravel, her body dissolving into the mist, not painfully, but as if she were made of smoke, her atoms scattering, reforming. The world around her dissolved into a swirling vortex of light and shadow. She was no longer standing on Maple Street. She was walking the path once again, the streets shifting around her like pages in a book, each turn revealing a different era, a different version of Dorrington. The buildings changed, the cars changed, the people changed, but the path remained the same. She saw herself, a ghostly, translucent figure, walking alongside Arthur Vale, alongside Jeremy Clive, alongside others whose faces she couldn't quite discern, all silent, all walking the endless loop. Her reflection caught in a shop window, a blurred, indistinct image. She raised a hand and saw her own face, pale, distant, like a shadow, like a photograph that hadn't fully developed. She was there, but not fully there. She was a reflection, a ghost in the machine of time. Behind her, the man in the tan coat walked steadily, his footsteps silent as ever, a constant presence, a silent guide in this eternal procession. Claire understood. She was part of the walk now. Part of the story repeating itself through time, an eternal loop, a prisoner of perception. The mirror had claimed her, drawn her into its timeless reflection. But somewhere deep inside, a spark of resistance remained, a defiant ember in the chilling void. She could feel it, a thread connecting her to the world she had left behind, the life she had known, a memory of warmth and solidity. It was faint, but it was there. The path was long, the walk endless, a perpetual twilight journey. But Claire vowed silently, a fierce, unspoken promise in the echoing silence, she would find a way to break the cycle. To step out of the shadow. To be more than a reflection. To reclaim her reality. Epilogue: the first step. The fog lifted slowly from Dorrington as dawn crept over the horizon, washing the streets with pale, ethereal light. The world outside Claire's apartment began to stir, the distant hum of morning traffic, the faint chirping of birds, the smell of fresh bread rising from the bakery below. She stood at her window, watching the world come alive again, but feeling somehow untouched by the passing day, disconnected, like an actor watching a play from backstage. The familiar sounds and sights were muted, distant, as if separated by a thin, invisible veil. She touched her wrist, where the faint marks had begun to fade, becoming almost imperceptible, a ghost of a scar. The memory of the man in the tan coat, the silent guide, the endless walker, was still vivid in her mind, a haunting presence. She knew now that she was part of something much larger than herself, a story woven into the very fabric of time, a loop waiting to be broken, a cosmic knot that she was now tasked with unraveling. Her new reality was a strange, unsettling paradox. During the day, she existed as Claire Hastings, the librarian, moving through her routines, interacting with Ellie and Mr. Donovan, ordering books, cataloging new arrivals. But the world felt subtly different, its colors a little less vibrant, its sounds a little less sharp. She felt a constant, low hum beneath her skin, a vibration that resonated with the unseen path. and at precisely 8:17 p.m., as the fog rolled in, she would find herself on the path, walking alongside the man in the tan coat, a silent participant in the mirror walk. She was a ghost during the night, unseen by cameras, unheard by human ears, a reflection in the mirror of time. She saw the past, the fragmented moments of Arthur Vale's life, the terror of Jeremy Clive, the blank despair of Margaret Renner. She saw the countless others who had walked this path, their faces indistinct, their stories lost to the mists of time. She was one of them now, yet crucially, she retained her consciousness, her will, her spark of resistance. The mirror had claimed her body, but not her mind. This unique perspective, this liminal existence, was her new weapon. She could observe the loop from within, understanding its mechanics, its subtle shifts. During her nocturnal walks, she paid closer attention to the environment, searching for anomalies, for anything that deviated from the endless repetition. She noticed faint, almost imperceptible distortions in the fog, whispers that seemed to carry meaning, subtle shifts in the light around certain gravestones. Her journal lay open on the table, no longer hidden, but a tool, a new kind of research. It was filled with notes, questions, and the fragments of a mystery that had consumed her life, now her very existence. She picked up her pen and began to write again, not just about the man who vanished, but about the woman who refused to be lost, the woman who would fight for her return. She began to theorize. The date, October 22nd, was clearly a critical anchor. Was it a point of weakness in the fabric of reality? Was it the anniversary of a specific event that had initiated the loop? The visions she'd experienced hinted at Arthur Vale's war trauma. Was the walk a manifestation of his unresolved grief, a perpetual haunting of his own past? And if so, could it be disrupted? Her research during the day became more focused. She delved into local historical records, not just for disappearances, but for any unusual events around October 22nd in Dorrington's past. She looked for mentions of mirrors, of strange phenomena, of anything that might connect to Eleanor Trask's cryptic diary entry. She found vague folklore about thin places in the valley, spots where the veil between worlds was said to be permeable, often associated with ancient burial grounds. The cemetery, naturally, was one such place. She also started looking into the lives of Jeremy Clive and Margaret Renner more deeply, searching for any common threads beyond their proximity to the walk. Were they observers like her? Had they, too, received notes? The police records were sparse, but she found old newspaper articles, interviews with their families, small details that might now hold new significance. As the sun rose higher, painting the sky with hues of rose and gold, Claire made a quiet promise, a vow whispered into the stillness of her apartment. She would walk the path again and again. Not to follow the shadow, not to be a passive reflection, but to step beyond it. To understand its rules, to exploit its weaknesses. To find the door no one else had seen. To break the cycle that had claimed Arthur Vale and countless others. And to come home. Not just to her apartment above the bakery, but to her own reality, whole and free. The first step had been taken, and the long, arduous journey had truly begun. Thank you for listening to Bedtime Noir. You've just experienced The Man in the Tan Coat, a story about silence, echoes, and the doors we choose to open. If the shadows linger just a little longer tonight, don't worry. Some mysteries stay with us for a reason. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and lets us bring you more haunting tales. We'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Drop a comment below, we read everyone. Until next time, stay curious, and sleep well.